In Canada, friendship rarely announces itself loudly. It forms without spectacle, without immediate intimacy, and often without a clear beginning. For many Americans arriving or observing closely, the first surprise is not distance, but subtlety. Social warmth exists, yet it is carefully regulated, unfolding at a slower, quieter pace. Politeness is not a doorway to closeness. It is a neutral ground where everyone starts. Smiles are present, conversations are courteous, but emotional access remains measured, as if friendship must first prove its stability before being acknowledged. Early impressions often center on this restraint. Canadians are socially present, but rarely intrusive. Conversations tend to remain situational about weather, shared routines, or small logistical details rather than personal histories or ambitions. Silence is not treated as a problem to solve. Pauses are allowed to breathe. Where Americans may interpret friendliness as an invitation to accelerate connection, Canadians often treat friendliness as a baseline civic behavior, not a personal signal. This difference can feel confusing, even misleading, to those accustomed to faster emotional exchanges. Beneath this surface calm lies a distinct cultural logic. Canadian friendship is shaped by values of respect for personal boundaries, emotional self-sufficiency, and social equality. There is an unspoken resistance to imposing oneself on others, even socially. Invitations are extended carefully, often indirectly, leaving room for refusal without discomfort. Reliability is valued more than enthusiasm. Showing up consistently matters more than expressing intensity. Trust is not granted through openness alone, but through repeated, low-drama interactions over time. Everyday social patterns reinforce this approach. Co-workers may share years of cordial interaction before meeting outside the workplace. Neighbors exchange greetings for long periods before progressing to shared activities. Friendships often grow out of structured environments, sports leagues, volunteer groups, recurring routines where shared presence slowly accumulates into familiarity. The absence of urgency is intentional. Emotional closeness is treated as something earned quietly, not negotiated verbally. For Americans observing this rhythm, the difference is less about warmth and more about tempo. Canadian friendships tend to resemble long-term investments rather than immediate bonds. They are built through patience, predictability, and mutual non-intrusion. What may initially feel like distance often reveals itself, over time, as a form of respect, a social architecture designed to protect both connection and independence. Without forcing either interview too quickly, this gradual pace also shapes how Canadians signal belonging. Friendship is rarely defined through explicit declarations or frequent emotional check-ins. Instead, it becomes visible through small, practical gestures. An invitation to join a regular routine, a message sent without urgency, or the quiet assumption that someone will be present again next week often carries more weight than verbal affirmation. Consistency replaces intensity as the primary marker of closeness. In this context, friendship is something demonstrated rather than discussed. Social space plays a central role in this dynamic. Canadians often maintain clearer boundaries between public and private life. Personal struggles, ambitions, or emotional conflicts are not immediately introduced into new relationships. This is not avoidance, but sequencing. Emotional depth is reserved for connections that have already proven durable. As a result, friendships may appear emotionally muted at first, yet become remarkably steady once established. There is less fluctuation, fewer dramatic highs and lows, and a stronger expectation of mutual steadiness. Group settings further reinforce this pattern. Canadian social life often revolves around shared activities rather than spontaneous socializing. Time together is structured, predictable, and purpose-driven. This structure creates a sense of safety. It allows relationships to grow without pressure, giving individuals control over how much of themselves they reveal and when. The absence of constant emotional performance reduces social exhaustion and minimizes misunderstandings. Americans, accustomed to faster relational feedback, sometimes interpret this reserve as disinterest or emotional distance. Invitations that arrive late, plans made far in advance, or limited follow-up communication can feel ambiguous. Yet within the Canadian context, these behaviors signal thoughtfulness rather than detachment. Space is left intentionally, allowing relationships to breathe without demanding constant reinforcement. Over time, this approach produces a different emotional climate. Friendships tend to be quieter, but more durable. Loyalty is assumed once established and rarely tested through emotional displays. Conflict is often handled indirectly or minimized to preserve harmony. There is a shared understanding that maintaining social ease is itself a form of care. The relationship does not need to be constantly defined to be real, as these patterns settle into daily life. Many Americans begin to recognize that Canadian friendship is less about emotional immediacy and more about long-term social comfort. The absence of urgency creates a stable background where trust accumulates slowly, almost invisibly. What initially feels like emotional distance gradually reveals itself as a carefully maintained balance between connection and autonomy. Shaped by a culture that values calm continuity over expressive closeness, this balance subtly reshapes expectations around friendship itself. In the Canadian context, relationships are not required to perform emotional closeness to validate their existence. A friend does not need constant reassurance, frequent contact, or explicit affirmation to remain a friend. Absence is not immediately interpreted as neglect. Time apart does not automatically weaken the bond. The relationship is trusted to hold its shape quietly, without continuous maintenance. This mindset influences how support is offered. Canadians often wait to be asked rather than intervening unprompted. Help is practical, measured, and respectful of autonomy. Emotional support may arrive in understated forms, checking in without probing, offering assistance without commentary, or simply maintaining presence during difficult periods. The intention is not to solve or absorb another person's emotional state, but to stand nearby without intrusion. Care is expressed through restraint as much as through action. As friendships mature, emotional depth does emerge, but it remains grounded. Conversations may become more personal, yet they retain a sense of moderation. Vulnerability is shared selectively, without expectation of immediate reciprocation. There is little pressure to match emotional intensity. Instead, mutual understanding develops through accumulated context, shared experiences, long familiarity, and an unspoken awareness of each other's rhythms. For many Americans, adapting to this style requires recalibration. The absence of overt emotional signals challenges assumptions about interest and commitment. Yet over time, the stability of these relationships becomes evident. Canadian friendships tend to endure transitions, career changes, relocations, long periods of limited contact without collapsing. Their strength lies not in constant reinforcement, but in quiet reliability. Ultimately, these small social habits reflect a broader cultural philosophy. Friendship is treated as part of the social landscape rather than a central performance of identity. It is woven into everyday life subtly, without demanding attention. In this way, Canadian friendships reveal a model of connection that prioritizes emotional sustainability over immediacy. They suggest that closeness does not always need to be loud, and that trust can grow most securely in spaces where nothing is being rushed.